So, when it comes to growing a channel on YouTube, as basic as it may sound, one of the most difficult challenges faced is finding out exactly what your audience is interested in. I may want to produce a video about fatal fluffies or the Viper, but would anyone really care to watch it? That being said, apparently, a lot of you like death, but more specifically, Dead Joes. And if there's one thing I learned as a content creator, it's to give the people what they want. Honestly, I don't know what it is, but I'm sure most of you would agree that there is something naturally fascinating to us as human beings about the concept of death. As a kid, I remember being completely enthralled by this docuseries called Faces of Death, which basically compiled allegedly actual deaths that were caught on film. Did you guys see that? When I was older, I was obsessed with the Marvel Universe resource, The Book of the Dead, which told the stories of all the superheroes and villains who had died in the comics. Of course, I'm pretty sure more than half the characters covered there have since been brought back to life. But I digress. Death, whether we'd like to admit it or not, has and will always be a trending topic in our daily lives, which would probably explain why my previous video on Dead Joe and Cobra characters quickly shot up to one of my most watched videos in record time. But as extensive of a list as I came up with, one thing was made clear by most of you, and that was that I missed out on a good number of notable deaths. And so, here we are. Let's get started with even more Dead Joes and Cobras. First up is probably my most grievous omission from the original video. And believe me, I'm still kicking myself for leaving her out. And that would be Sergeant Jody Craig, codenamed Shooter. Who? Okay, for those not familiar, way back in the very first issue of the original G.I. Joe comics from Marvel, there was a specific panel that showed headshots of the original G.I. Joe team displayed on a computer screen. All 14 of them. Wait, what? 14? So, apparently, on the far bottom corner of the screen was an additional member simply codenamed Shooter, whose face was conveniently covered up by a hand. Actually, there looks to be a 15th member and maybe a 16th. Sorry. Back to Shooter. So this was meant to be an innocent little Easter egg, inside joke, or tribute to the original Marvel editor-in-chief, Jim Shooter, and nothing more, and was pretty much forgotten over the years until 24 years later, original series writer and G.I. Joe godfather Larry Hama released a special miniseries called G.I. Joe Declassified for the then new publisher Devil's Due, wherein he basically added more meat to the bone of the original team's assembly, fleshing out members' specific recruitment stories and introducing a new character, Sergeant Jody Craig, a cadre non-commissioned officer at the Chaplain's Assistance School located above the Joes' secret underground base, The Pit. Anyway, unbeknownst to the rest of the Joes, Sergeant Craig was the secret 14th member of the team, who as per her name, was a sniper. So yeah, in an interesting retcon, it was revealed that Shooter was actually present in a number of the Joes' early missions, providing cover for them like their secret guardian angel. And she served that purpose up until the very first issue of the Marvel comic, which was retold from her perspective. Anyway, at the end of the issue, she provided cover for the team as they evacuated the Cobra Castle, set to explode, aboard a hijacked Cobra copter. Unfortunately, when she realized that Cobra soldiers were using civilians as ammo bearers, she broke her cover to rescue them, and while she was successful in allowing them to escape, Shooter herself was shot and killed. The sad part of it all is that even if there was a service held in her honor, the Joes had no idea of the extent of her sacrifice on the battlefield and the fact that many of them owed their lives to her. In any case, Shooter lives on in plastic form when her very first figure ever was released in 2016 as part of the 50th anniversary line, and a larger classified version was released in 2023. Next up, we have another major character from the G.I. Joe comics, Billy Kessler, better known as Cobra Commander's son. Now, I mentioned him in my first video as someone who narrowly escaped death when a car wreck he was in was blown up by the Cobra agent's scrap iron. But apparently, not even Coco's son, now sporting a bionic leg and trained by an Arashikage ninja master, can escape the Reaper. In the Devil's Due series, which was originally intended to be the continuation of the Marvel run, Billy attempts to finish off what he originally planned to do when he was first introduced in the comics, and that was to kill his dear old dad. Unfortunately, despite his maximum effort, the commander fools Billy with the use of an imposter and ultimately takes his own son down for good with a poisoned dart to the neck. Once dead, Billy's corpse is strung up on a flagpole for all of Cobra to see, and for them to all know that no one is untouchable. Now that's hardcore. But when IDW took over the Joe license and rehired Hama to continue his original Marvel run, Billy's death was undone. Until he was killed again, this time at the hands of a cyborg blue ninja. Billy's body was returned to his father by Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, and at least this version of Coco actually gave a damn for his dead son. The next bunch of notable Joe deaths were actually not Joe's, but basically Russia's version of G.I. Joe known as the Oktober Guard. Original members Colonel Brekov, Horror Show, Stormovic, and Shrage all met their end during a mission in the fictional Latin American country of Sierra Gordo, where they essentially went out in a blaze of glory, crashing their explosives-laced jeep right into an Iron Grenadier Razorback. A later member, Lieutenant Gorky, also met his end in the Devil's Due comics, when he was gunned down by a helicopter piloted by Destro. And then we have the advanced recon specialist Sneak Peek, who was seemingly killed in an operation in Benzine when he was gunned down trying to save an innocent civilian boy. It's a really touching story wherein his fellow Joe Dusty, fulfilling a promise he made to Sneak Peek's mom to bring home his body at any cost, literally carries the dying Sneak Peek on his shoulders across the desert back to the Joe base. Unfortunately, when they arrive, Sneak Peek has died. Until his death is apparently retconned years later, with his demise apparently faked in order for him to go on a deep undercover operation to take down the intergalactic despot, Dark Helmet. Just kidding. He went undercover to aid in the capture of the Iron Grenadier operative, Darklon. But supposedly after that, Sneak Peek actually did die in another mission, but for the life of me, I couldn't find the issue to back that up. So, if anyone can confirm that, please let me know in the comments below. What I do know is that a second Joe taking on the codename Sneak Peek was introduced in the Devil's Due run as he was assigned to infiltrate the Dreadnoks, which would probably explain his green hair. Anyway, he didn't last long either as he was eventually killed off while he was spying on a new advanced Cobra bat that went haywire. And speaking of Devil's Due, when they took over the license in 2001, continuing the Marvel story set a few years later in the future, where some notable Joe characters had since let things go, others may have possibly crossed over that rainbow bridge in the sky. I'm referring of course to the Joe K9 handler Mutt's partner, Junkyard. Okay, fine. While Junkyard's death isn't confirmed, we all know that a few human years can be quite a lifetime in dog years. And by the time Mutt reappears in the series, he's got a new partner in Junkyard Jr., the OG Junkyard's son. So while the best case scenario is that Daddy Junk is happily retired, he could very well be up in heaven, because, you know, all dogs go to heaven. And speaking of heaven, do you know what my idea of YouTube heaven would be? A channel with a whole lot of awesome viewers like you all. If you've been enjoying the stuff I've been putting out on Stories from the Toy Shelf for some time now, why not try giving my channel membership a try? For a real super itty bitty ditty price, you can enjoy even more exclusive unscripted content, early access to the main content, and a more collaborative say in what stories I will tackle next. I know that there are a bunch of you who might have enjoyed interacting with week after week. Here's hoping we can level up on that. All you gotta do is click on the join button on the channel homepage. But either way, member or not, your support is always very much appreciated, so thank you. Anyway, back to the story. Given that a few years had passed, it only made sense for Devil's Due to also infuse new characters into the storyline. And two of the first major recruits would be the computer hackers, Firewall and Damon. And while Firewall went on to become one of the more popular new Joes in the series, especially since Devil's Due killed off the OG computer specialist Mainframe, Damon didn't last quite as long as he was killed off early on when a newly returned Serpentor basically snapped his neck. Devil's Due also introduced a new character to the Cobra side as well, in the form of the mercenary spy, Wraith, real name Charles Halifax. due to his cool ability of literally disappearing into thin air thanks to a state-of-the-art stealth suit supplied to him by Destro, Wraith would go on to be one of the more popular additions to the series. He was even one of the very first new characters to receive not one, but two 25th anniversary figures early on in the line. Unfortunately, Wraith took on more than he could chew when he battled the Baroness, who took advantage of a failsafe device implanted in Wraith's suit by Destro to defeat him and take him out for good. Other notable characters introduced in Devil's Due were two apprentices who trained under Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, Ophelia and Junko Akita, respectively. Unfortunately, being trained by the two top ninjas in the G.I. Joe universe doesn't automatically give you a free pass in life. Ophelia, and yes, I did notice she bears an uncanny resemblance to Scarlet, weird, is swiftly unalived in her first mission with Snake Eyes as they try to take down the Cobra saboteur Firefly. Apparently, story-wise, Ophelia turns out to be a literal red herring with regards to Snake Eyes' true apprentice. See, Firefly also manages to kill off another highly trained special mission force, no, not G.I. Joe, they were currently disbanded at the time, called the Hammer Team, except for one member, Sean Collins, who eventually becomes Snake Eyes' new apprentice, Kamakura. Storm Shadow's apprentice, and apparently lover, Junko Akita, is kidnapped and tortured by the Red Ninja Clan, and she is brainwashed into believing that her tormentor is none other than Storm Shadow. And so when her master attempts to rescue her, they are united, this time as enemies. Eventually though, Junko comes to her senses, but still tragically leaps off a cliff to her supposed death, even if her body is never recovered. But wait, back to Snake Eyes' new apprentice, Sean Collins, who apparently has another deeper connection with Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, as he is the adopted son of their old Vietnam squad mate, Wade Collins. Originally thought to be killed in action, Wade actually survives and eventually finds his way back to the US after the war and joins Cobra as a Crimson Guard. Anyway, he ultimately returns to the side of the good guys, but is unfortunately killed off years later when he attempts to take on Cobra Commander himself. But he's at least given a proper hero send-off. Another character with a deep connection to Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow would be the Arashikage Master, the Blind Master, who is best known for training Cobra Commander's son Billy as well as the other G.I. Joe ninja, Jinx. He unfortunately meets his end in a duel with the Cobra Master of Disguise, Zartan, also a ninja. Initially though, the Blind Master manages to defeat Zartan and comes this close to exacting revenge on him for assassinating his own sensei, the Hard Master. However, the Blind Master's own apprentice, a kid named Tyrone, brings him to his senses. Ever the opportunist, Zartan then takes that moment to use the Blind Master's knife against him. And so, Zartan lives to fight another day. Or does he? Let's go jump to the next G.I. Joe comics publisher, IDW, where in their own continuity, the OG Zartan is actually dead. See, the original man named Zartan started out pretty normal, just a highly skilled special ops agent working directly under the Baroness. Unfortunately, despite being very good at his job, his extracurricular activities proved to be more trouble than his actual worth. And so he was sent off to Destro to be a lab rat for his new human teleportation project, which caused his body to literally disintegrate after his first jump. And that would have been the end of him had his complete genetic map not been preserved by Cobra scientists, who then incorporated it into a blank clone body, reformatting it into an exact copy of the original Zartan, except this time as the skin-changing Master of Disguise. But if you think that death is kind of a cop-out for Zartan, we can turn to the awesome micro-series G.I. Joe Resolute, where Zartan takes on both Duke and Scarlet, but gets shot in the back for all his troubles by Duke, as he delivers his typical bad guy speech to a defenseless Scarlet. And while we're on Resolute, let's give these two G.I. Joe members, two real American heroes, whoever they may have been, a shout out, as they too were most likely killed off after getting struck down by some falling debris, sending them plummeting back to Earth. No parachutes this time. Anyways, speaking of even more shoutouts, I do believe these two allies of G.I. Joe, the White Clown and Magda the Bareback Rider, definitely deserve one for the pivotal role that they played in helping Snake Eyes and company rescue the Joes Stalker, Snowjob, and Quick Kick from a Barovian gulag. The two political rebels are unfortunately captured by the new ruling government in league with Cobra, and without hesitation are gunned down on the spot by the commander himself. Another character that was brought to my attention was the ninja named Margarita Shiro, aka Pale Peony. Now I'll admit I'm not very familiar with this character, but she was mentioned by many viewers as a notable death. Pale Peony was introduced by Larry Hama in the Devil's Due continuity and was popular enough to transfer over with Hama to IDW in his continuation of his Marvel story. While she never actually joined the Joe team, from what I know, she was a regular ally and partnered up frequently with Jinx. Unfortunately, Peony met her end when she was vaporized, trying to take down an enemy cyborg which basically self-destructed, taking Peony with her and leaving nothing but a smoldering pile of pink clothes, the color that Peony was best known for wearing. But back to IDW, where there is one more Joe character worth mentioning, and that would be the sorta ninja Chameleon. Chameleon made her debut in the second Cobra miniseries, where she is hired by Hawk to find and recover the Joe Chuckles, who had since gone missing after the events of the first miniseries. Anyway, if you think Chameleon looks familiar, no, she is not IDW's version of Jinx. That Jinx was unfortunately killed off in the previous story. She was the handler and lover of Chuckles, whom he was forced to kill to prove his loyalty to Cobra, and the driving force in his quest for revenge. Anyway, Chameleon's resemblance to Jinx, though, isn't an accident. In fact, it's a major reason why she was hired by Hawk in the first place. Eventually, though, she does find Chuckles, but lets him go off on his mission of revenge, as she instead takes back with her a more valuable asset to Hawk, the Cobra defector Erica Letienne. Anyway, years later, Chameleon, now going by the name Ronin, is is on the run with IDW's version of Billy, who is not a ninja and has the undesirable task of keeping him away from Storm Shadow. And as you can guess, it does not end well for her. She should have just kept running. Next, let's head back to Cobra, or at least another enemy of the Joes in the oddly named Headman. Back in the 90s, when Hasbro was trying their darndest to stay away from the whole military theme of the toy line, they had their real American heroes set their sights on fighting drugs, and thus the Drug Elimination Force was born. And along with that special team came a special enemy, the dastardly drug kingpin and lesser-known brother of the Hamburglar, the Headman. By this time, I was totally out in Joe's, but I did hear that he was killed off panel in both the Marvel and Devil's Due continuities. But it was actually in the much maligned Deke cartoon series where the Headman made his actual mark, as he managed to turn the G.I. Joe Green Beret and brother of Duke and hero of the G.I. Joe movie, Falcon, a druggie hopelessly addicted to the Headman's special drug. Anyway, it takes the combined forces of G.I. Joe and Cobra to ultimately take down the Headman, who apparently overdoses on his own drug and dies in a cartoon. And for all those peeps who gave me grief over my general statement that no one died in the 80s American cartoons, well, this episode aired in the 90s. So there. Anyway, let's move on to even more cartoon deaths, this time from the older Sunbow series, where the writers found a very convenient way to get rid of 3 OG Joe characters, Steeler, Grunt, and Clutch, by, well, killing them off. Okay, to be more accurate, Steeler, Grunt, and Clutch from an alternate universe were killed off. In the 2-part story, Worlds Without End, a bunch of Joes, including the aforementioned trio, are accidentally zapped into a parallel universe wherein Cobra is victorious and pretty much the entire Joe team is either dead or missing in action. 3 confirmed dead are Steeler, Grunt, and Clutch, whose decayed corpses are discovered at the bottom of a pit. In the end, the Joes are able to return to their world without Steeler, Grunt, and Clutch, who decide to stay behind and continue the fight in the Cobra-ruled world. Oh, and in that world, apparently the Baroness is a resistance fighter who employs thong-wearing Cobra soldiers and who was that universe's Steeler's lover. And finally, let's cap things off with arguably the biggest death to rock the main Hama G.I. Joe universe, wherein the commando/ninja Snake Eyes, yes, Snake Eyes, sacrifices himself to take down a once again resurrected Serpentor by tackling him with a live grenade in hand. His death opened the way for a now conveniently facially damaged Sean Collins to take up the mantle of the new Snake Eyes, and even later on, a new female Snake Eyes, Dawn Moreno, would be brought in. Anyway, I didn't include this death in my original episode because ultimately I knew that the OG Snake Eyes was inevitably resurrected in a fresh, newly cloned body with intact vocal cords, allowing this all-new and improved Snake Eyes to speak. Look, I'll be the first to admit I'm not on top of all of this, but since it's written by Hama, I'll give these changes the benefit of the doubt before I pass any judgment. Maybe one day I'll read all of it, but on face value, I don't know, it just seems a bit too much of a departure from the essence of the original character. I mean, what's next? They'll make Snake Eyes Asian? Oh wait, okay, scratch that. And speaking of Asian Joes, if that's what you're into, Joes that is, not hoes, I've got a story for you over here about the Asian silent weapons master, Quick Kick. Oh, and his fellow Native American buddy, Spirit. Or if you want other Joe stories, you can check out this playlist over here. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope you come back for more.